everyone, and welcome to the City of Santa Clarita's Arts Symposium. This year's is virtual. We do this every October. We have a big Arts Symposium, and this year's is virtual, and this is part of the New Heights Artist Development series of the city. And today we're focusing on the Director's Chair for film and television directors, commercial directors, and I'm really excited because each of these individuals has had a different journey to the Director's Chair and different focal experience. We've got indie filmmaking, we've got documentary filmmaking, really impressive commercial work and clients and television work. So I think it's gonna be a really exciting panel. They each have made work that's inspired me as a filmmaker and just as a storyteller. So that's always great when you get to have a conversation with people who inspire you every day and make work that you find really inspirational and meaningful. So I want to thank them each for being here in Atlanta, Los Angeles, and Ireland. So we've got a lot of places going on, and that's the magic of the virtual space. So I'm asking them each to just start with their journey to the Director's Chair. I think sometimes we have this idea that there's one way to get somewhere. You have to go to this film school or intern at this company, but I think there's lots of ways to get where you want to go. And so I really want to have them each just start and share their personal journey, how they got to where they are in their filmmaking career as directors. So Frederick, I'm going to have you start. So please share your journey with us.
My name is Frederick Taylor. I'm a filmmaker. Initially started in journalism. Went to college in the Northeast, went to Temple University to be a journalist. I wanted to be a writer. I had written for the school newspaper, and I enjoyed writing and English and things like that were the things I excelled at the most, that I enjoyed the most. I had a high aptitude for math and the other stuff, but I didn't like it. I didn't enjoy it. I wasn't into it. And I was into story. That was just kind of my deal. I love to draw. I love to paint. I went to Temple University because I wanted to go to a communications program and become a journalist. And I wrote an article for my school newspaper in college about why I thought that there could someday be a African-American as president of the United States. I felt very strongly about that at that particular time. And I got in a lot of trouble. And the editor of the school newspaper said that an African-American will never be president of the United States, and that an African-American could never be president of the United States because African-Americans cannot separate church and state, and that too much of the African-American discourse in America revolved around the church. And I became very upset and was very angry about this. And I pointed out to him that, well, you know, African-Americans were slaves for several hundred years, and the only place they were allowed to get together and talk about thoughts, feelings, and ideas and their belief systems was in the sanctity of the church. And that is why they have such an incredible affinity for it, because it's been their saving grace. And by no strange coincidence, some of their greatest leaders have come from the religious sect. And I said, I think you should still run the article. And he refused to. And so it became this holy war. And then eventually, to shut me up, he ran the article, but he took out the teeth of the article. He edited my piece. And that angered me. And I said, I'll never again do anything creative where someone's going to tell me what to say and tell me what to think, as far as my belief systems are concerned. And so I was in a downward spiral at the time. And I had an advisor who suggested that I take some elective courses to try to find my way. Because I was on the verge of, I'm going to drop out of school. I want out of here. I don't want to do this. Hate the system. I was going down the angry path. And he encouraged me to take some elective courses. Don't take anything in a particular discipline. Just take things that you're interested in. And he said, hey, I think you should take this course about film criticism. You know, you just watch films and you write about them. And I thought, well, that's cool. I like to write and I like movies. So I started doing that, and I found out that I really enjoyed it. And I got my first easy A in college, where I became the smartest guy in the room, and everything I handed in was an A, and other people were floundering and B minus, C, and C minuses, and everybody hated me because it became so effortless for me to write about films. I don't know why. My teacher felt that I had some sort of aptitude for it. So after that, my advisor said, it seems like you really enjoy film. Maybe you should take a production course. So he suggested taking an editing course. It happened again. I got another easy A, became one of the students in the class that excelled the most. I enjoyed it. I loved going to class. I became a really good editor. Then they said, hey, take a cinematography class. And the same thing happened again. And so then finally I said, well, I'm just going to change my major to filmmaking because I guess I'm pretty good at it. And that's how I got started as a filmmaker. And I came along in the sort of explosion of hip hop and African-American music and things like that. So I ended up going to graduate school in Atlanta. And I just so happened to be headed to Atlanta during the gestation period of Outkast, TLC, Tony Braxton, you know, Arrested Development, all of these amazing, Usher, all of these amazing artists out of Atlanta. So it was kind of easy pickings. Like, and I would just say, hey, I'm a filmmaker. I can shoot your music video. And I just started doing that. And that's how I got started. And then from there, it just sort of branched out into becoming interested in other genres of music, and then sort of pivoting into the world of commercial work, and then eventually documentary, because I learned about this community of people that were from the Appalachian Hills of North Georgia and like West Virginia, places like that, that had immigrated to Atlanta, but had never assimilated into Atlanta. They lived this mill community world for 100 years. And I thought, wow, that's a really interesting documentary piece. And the reason I did it was because these people were white, but they lived in all of the stereotypical things that we think of in the inner city, you know, crime, drive-by shootings, teenage pregnancies, you know, the gamut. And I thought, wow, I'm going to make a documentary that shows how anybody can be super poor and live in these disadvantaged situations if certain factors are in play. I wanted to do something that sort of countered stereotype. And that was always my thing. Because I reflect that in myself, that I'm African American, but I have to continually battle against stereotypes because I'm Black and I'm a male. So there's all of these assumptions about me that are not true, even though, you know, I've got a master's degree, I travel around the world, I own my own company, and I make documentaries and all this other stuff. I have to tell people who I am all the time when I meet them. There's no one assumes that I am civil. I have to prove it. So that's kind of where my axe grinds in being a creative artist. And that's kind of basically how I got started. And then I've been able to leverage it into sustainable work as well, because the market's opened up and more people want to do things that are culturally diverse and things like that as well. So I've become kind of a cultural whisperer for agencies and things like that that want to reach out or reach into communities of color, but they don't necessarily always know how. So I unpack that for them as well. And that's kind of how I pay the bills, as they like to say. You know, I sell the image in order to continue to uplift and promote the spirit or what goes on inside of me.
Thank you. And I love that, because so often, especially when you're younger and you're starting out, someone squashes you like that newspaper, and it can send you in a spiral. And I love that you found that way to turn that around and find what you're really good at. I mean, I've seen your work. You're really good at this and you enjoy it, and you're still finding ways to be sustainable and talking about that. I think we don't talk about that enough. Like, people think everyone lives off of their directing work or their independent film distribution deals, and I don't think very many people do live off of those things. So I love that you touched on that as well, because if you're building a sustainable career as a director, it means having other skill sets in your tool bag that you can use. So
exactly. And being open to people assisting you. Like this person that helped me in college, my advisor, like, he saved my life. Like, he cared about me in a moment when I didn't know what to do with myself. Yeah. And so many times we walk over those people, we bypass those people, we don't think that's our problem or our issue, or there's nothing we can do for them. But sometimes when you do take time with people, you can really save a life or change the course for someone as well. And so that's something else that plays very deeply into what I do, because I always think like, okay, in making this film, can I do something that can be positively affecting on another person, you know, that may help them to get to a better place as well. So that's my deal.
Thank you. And I love it. And it creates good work too. So now, Rachel, I want to turn to you. Your path has been very different, but I think there's a lot of probably things that you relate to and connect to as well. So I'm really eager to hear you share your journey to the director's chair.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, very different, and yet these sort of points of being told no, or you can't do this, or, you know, there are similarities, Frederick, that I think you'll see as I tell my story. So I was a child actor. I was on sets as young as the age of 5. And I did a lot of work in New York City. I did over 300 commercials by the time I was 15 years old. And I was on the set all the time, and it really informed my, I would learn my lines from storyboards before I could actually read. So I understood the nature of shots and how the puzzle of films were put together before I understood the text of them. So I think there's sort of this organic piece of my brain that was formed at a very early age. I also draw and I paint and I sang and I danced and I acted and I did, you know, I was sort of a multi-talented kid who loved movies. My mother was a real movie lover. She used to wake me up in the middle of the night so I could see the classics of the 30s and 40s. This was before there were videos. And so I knew I loved that frame with amazing costumes and sets and lighting and people and, you know, action and stories. And I would write stories, but I didn't really sort of know what I wanted with it. So I went to Sarah Lawrence College. And in college, I flip-flopped between the theater department and the art department, theater department, art department. And I couldn't really find my people because in the art department, everybody was such an introvert. And in the theater department, everybody was such an extrovert. And I was really neither a perfect one or the other. And it wasn't until I was a senior in college and I read an article in the New York Times about European women directors, Anya Svarda, Lena Wertmuller, that I literally like had an epiphany. It had not occurred to me at that stage in my life that I could be a director, because I had never seen a woman director. I didn't know that I just didn't know it was a possibility. So I got a job at an advertising agency. I worked at Young and Rubicam for a while as a junior copywriter, art director. And they loved me there, and they offered me a job as a producer. And I said, well, I don't want to produce commercials. If anything, I want to direct commercials. And again, they said, well, there are no women directing commercials. They couldn't think of one. So like an idiot, because I didn't have a mentor, somebody to advise me, I thought, oh, well, if I can't direct commercials, I guess I'll direct movies. So, I went to film school and I got a master's at NYU, and I made a bunch of films at NYU. I was a perfect student for film because, you know, I had the visual component, I had the performance component, I had the story component. And so film school was really a great place for me where I was able to utilize all of these skill sets. And my graduate thesis film, when I finished, won a lot of awards. It got a lot of attention and got me my first agents. And even though clearly I was, you know, on my way, I could not get a job. And every time I had a meeting, it was like, well, you know, you're just a cute girl, and oh, you're so pretty, or, you know, we had a woman direct this thing last year, and she didn't work out very well, and our crew doesn't like women, our cast doesn't like women. I mean, there were just all these reasons why it wasn't going to happen. So I started writing, and I had some beginner's luck as a writer. I optioned my first screenplays. A couple of my first screenplays were dumbed down to become, you know, Lifetime movies and Hallmark movies and SyFy Channel movies. So it was lucky in that way. And it took about 10 years, and I moved to Los Angeles in the meantime. And I got married, and I had a baby, and I was in a mommy and me group when I met a fellow mom who said, you know, you should be my dad. I think he can help you. And I didn't know anything about nepotism. You know, my father was a dentist in the Bronx, and, you know, I'm from the Bronx. I don't know people in Hollywood. But her dad liked me and knew me and looked at my short films and introduced me to Stephen Bochco, who hired me to direct Doogie Howser. And that was my first job. It took a year and a half from the time that I met him for me to sort of, keep grooming that relationship. But eventually I got a job directing Doogie Howser, and that led to Picket Fences, and then that led to another show. Of course, it didn't happen so easily. There would be years or 2 years in between each. And so I started working pretty regularly as a television director while also continuing to write projects, features, at that time primarily features, now I write pilots as well, that would move my career in directions where I wanted them to go, even though I was very happy for the bread and butter job, workaday job of being on a set and directing episodic television. I had goals of wanting to direct other things. In the meantime, I also became an activist for gender parity in Hollywood and saw that, I was not alone as a woman who was struggling, and started writing about this and started setting articles in 1995. I think was my first article in the Hollywood Reporter, Variety, and then I became chair of the Women's Steering Committee at the Directors Guild, and I tried to really make some changes there. It was very difficult organization to penetrate for equity. And now I'm trying to get a feature film about Lily Ledbetter, the woman who President Obama named the Fair Pay Act about. I'm trying to get that set as a feature, and I'm doing really well. So, my activism and my work has sort of all come together.
Yes. And that's a through for both of you. I think that it doesn't have to work against you. I think sometimes people think
Right.
It does work against you. And I think that's an old way of thinking that we need to put away, and really show that it does not have to work against you. You can do both, you can do them well, and you can actually use it to find your audience, find your voice, and find your champions. So absolutely.
Exactly, especially if you're non-traditional, you're a woman or you're from a diverse community or whatever. There are no rules. Like, you don't have to go down that particular specific path.
Because it probably isn't working for you.
It probably isn't working. It's probably not there for you anyway, and no one's looking for you, and no one cares. So you might as well just blaze a trail in a different direction. Absolutely, and I wish more people of color and women and people from communities like LGBTQ could focus in that realm rather than obsessing so much about, I want to get in there, I want to get in the room and sit at the table with the typical people.
Well, there's no table anymore. Things are changing.
I agree.
So.
Exactly, and I just wish that more young filmmakers were informed of that.
Yeah.
Instead of spending so much time living in the mythology of the past about this industry and focus more on the future.
Well, that's really why I selected the three of you, because you guys are showing that future very much. And so, Jennifer, I know your path is also different, but also resonates. So I'm anxious to hear about it.
Yeah. So apologize. For me, it's 11:30 p.m. So you got your stories. Frederick, Rachel are so beautifully groomed. I'm mortified. So here's where I'll just start. I went to college in Southern California with a media studies major. I picked up kind of a passion for camera and visual, storytelling back in high school, just enjoying playing around with a little camera. And, at Pomona, there were, to all everything you guys are speaking about, there was definitely an emphasis, as a media studies major, there was a lot of emphasis in awareness, media literacy, the power of media, what it all means, and how media shapes culture, and how stereotypes and, just objectification, all those things kind of impact society. So that was my kind of background. That's where I began. So there was no way I could go into filmmaking without having a bit of a conscience. It was just kind of in me. I was brainwashed in a good way, and I'm happy about that. So that was my undergrad, and coming out of that, I really wanted to make narrative work. I had also done documentary work there. I'd done an internship in North Carolina on a documentary about diversity in college campuses, and it was, I think, a little bit ahead of its time. And so coming out of that, I said, okay, I want to make films, stories, fiction. I want to heroes were, I don't know, everybody from David Lynch to Scorsese or something. And so I, through some luck and nice recommendations and stuff, got into the American Film Institute, and through that, just decided I was committing to this kind of industry career in some form, whatever that meant. Because I came from a middle-class family, and I just have felt the guilt of not. I felt like I needed to kind of find a way to have some sort of sustainable career. The other option was going to the Art Institute of Chicago, and I wasn't sure I could have a sustainable career out of that. And similarly, like I also was falling in love with films that were kind of Sundance, Sundance Channel stuff. And so I kind of leaned in that direction at AFI. I got a lot of support there, a good network of people. The administration was kind to me. And so, I was the youngest person at the school, but it came out kind of going, okay, let me take on independent film, or let me make something. And I started interning around for independent filmmakers, and then attempted to make my first indie, which took a while, fundraising wise and development wise. I went to a lab and made some scenes and used those scenes to attract investors. It was just kind of scrapping the whole thing together. It took years because it was also really ambitious. It was ambitious. It had animation, it had visual effects in it. And I just wanted to kind of create this like fantasy world about this, from this perspective of this kid. And this was the film called Half-Life. And through all of that, I, through some luck, got that into Sundance through some really kind networking from my professors, Shel Dunye, Shari Freelo. They were the people that kind of, made the connections necessary to give me a shot at, playing at Sundance with my first feature. And so I did do that eventually, and that was kind of what kicked off this indie world career. And from there, I went to the Sundance Labs, and I was committed to this idea that I was going to be kind of this auteur filmmaker. And it was a bad time to raise money for a second movie. It was, the crash of 2008, and so it took a minute. I was living in New York, and the rent was cheap because of the crash, and I got asked to submit a proposal for ITVS's Future States project, Future States series, which was an anthology of science fiction films, short films, and notables like Ramin Barani and Barry Jenkins and Tina Mabry had made shorts through that. So I was like, okay, I can do this too. And so I made something. I submitted one proposal that got passed on because it was a little too adult, and I kind of converted that to another proposal that ultimately became this short film called Advantageous. And that short film was about a mother living in the future in 2042 maybe, and she was a single mom in New York, upper middle class woman who was trying to make sure her daughter got into the school of her choice, because if you don't get into the school of your choice in this future, you're either, you'll fall through the cracks and you'll become like a really kind of vulnerable woman in the future. And so that was called Advantageous. And it was a successful enough short for me to be able to turn that, bring in some of my past investors from my feature, and who supported me in turning that into a low budget sci-fi feature. So that became the low budget sci-fi feature Advantageous, which went to Sundance in competition and was bought by Netflix and kind of had its little history, and it's, it did really well. It had a bit of very much a kind of women-centric, feminist concern about the value of women in the future, and kind of opened up some doors. It won an award at Sundance, and that led to me going, okay, what do I do? And Sundance, who wanted to take care of me, and that let me waste away and not become a filmmaker, they said, what do you want to do? And I said, maybe I should do television, because it seems like television has evolved to a place where maybe someone like me who has some specific ideas about how to shoot something and cut something, because I do a lot of my own cutting, maybe there's a space for me somewhere there. And they said, maybe. And so it was a kind of a moment, a perfect storm of everything, where I had an agent through another fellowship, and that agent had, helped sell my film, and that led to, my agency, another manager, and multiple studios kind of helping me kind of break into television, which is, as Rachel is describing, a beast of its own. And there's a culture of its own, has a culture of its own. And I had to kind of go through cultural training to get to walk amongst the television population. And it's a whole other state of mind, from the work that I did for my own films, but it's had some success. And so at this point, I think I've done maybe, 10 or 11 episodes of television, which has been important and helpful for me just in terms of having some independence, financial independence as a woman, but also has exposed me to a lot of opportunities of, whether it's other film opportunities or writing opportunities, and maybe ways to kind of put together another passion project. So that's the sum of it. Hopefully that was helpful in some way.
No, I think so. And I think the through line seems to be mentors and finding the right people that see what makes you special. And that's why I think too, like drawing on who you are and your unique vision and the unique stories you want to tell, and finding those people that want to champion that or who see that and will say, okay, yes, and will help you open those doors. And so I think right now, I'm sure there's a lot of aspiring directors or even directors that were working a lot before and aren't as much right now that are going, how do I do that when there's none of these events, when the labs are all different, when there's more people applying to them, I'm sure, because there's a lot more people sitting at home with the time to apply for them, or maybe there's not, or maybe, I think it's shifting. So with people in limited circulation right now, so to speak, what can directors do from home right now to build their skill set, to network, to build the relationships and find those mentors or those opportunities that can move them forward?
Right.
Well, I think part of the problem is that it's such a stressful time for all of us, emotionally fraught with so many anxieties. What I think we should all be doing, and I speak to myself here too, is writing. This is a great time to be writing. But you need a certain kind of mental space in order to be happy writing. And it may work for some. I find that I'm able to do that on most days. But, there are other days when the news is just so fraught and it's scary times and my brain can't find its way into my imagination in the way that I would like it to. So my advice would be to try to write. This is a great time to really pack up your slate so that when we can be shooting, we have fresh, excellent material to try to get going.
It's a great tip.
And as a director who writes, I'm a director first and a writer second. I make my movies on paper. There's a way to really make movies with words. And I would strive everyone to challenge themselves to not only just write, but write beautifully so that each sentence and each phrase, to me, a screenplay is more poem than prose. And to really find the right words that describe it in the way so that you're really making a movie in your head.
Mm-hmm. No, I love that. Any other gems that you guys have found or tools that you're using or things that you've passed on to other filmmakers that have said, oh my gosh, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm losing my mind here scrolling through Twitter or Facebook, right now.
Yeah. Well, don't do that.
Exactly. Turn off the social media.
Turn off the social
tip number
media.
one.
Number one, because we have this sort of bending of the time-space continuum, things just evolve through the day differently now. You know, so we're not slaves to specific sort of slots of time where we're supposed to be doing something. So some days I sat down and I watched Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf for the first time in a very long time. And it opened me up again in a way that I hadn't really thought about in a long time, because the film is so good and it's so incredibly well written and it's so incredibly well acted. But then this time I noticed the camera work, and it's tons of handheld stuff going on and super long takes following people around handheld. And it got the wheels spinning again. So I think one of my things to share with people is that bring things into your discourse that stimulate you, that kind of get your juices flowing, to get you out of that space of, oh my God, these horrible things are happening in the world. What do you mean Donald Trump has coronavirus? So you don't worry about that. And you say, wow, that performance by Elizabeth Taylor and Richard Burton is outstanding. And Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf? And then one of the things that I've been doing too is just literally shooting my way out. That's all. I shoot constantly since the pandemic started. And I edit religiously since the pandemic started as well. So I'm going back into old things that I've shot and cutting, re-editing, or I'm shooting new things and cutting and making new things. So for me, it's a lot of this sort of Basquiat sort of throwing paint against the wall, seeing what works, and just finding images and ideas and things within the chaos that's in my mind and in the world around me as well. And as far as the writing goes, which I love to write as well, I've been compartmentalizing it into short form things, nothing like real big or long form, but short films, which I've been finding very fascinating as well. So I've just been sort of beta testing new things because, you know, the world's changed, it's pivoted, you know, the discourse is different, people are thinking in different spaces. And so I'm kind of like, how far can I push this? You know, I don't want to go back and do stereotypical things. I mean, we all have our own journeys as filmmakers here. For mine, I'm Black. And so when I hit a room or I'm in LA or you're black, you're black, you're black, you're black, you're black, you're black. So it's very difficult for me to have conversations and discussions about being a human being or things that are beyond these sort of stereotypes. When people want me in the room for something or saying, we want to do this inner city thing about this really poor kid that this terrible thing happens to. And then I say, well, both my parents have PhDs and my grandmothers went to college. You know, I'm thinking in a different space and I've traveled to, you know, almost every point on the globe. But that's not the conversation that's happening. So I'm like, how do I navigate in that? So for me, it's also strategy. You know, I am my own consultant as well as far as presentation, marketing, what sort of my brand looks like, because we're all brands here. We all have our thing. So I'm always navigating in my space, and how do I get into a intelligentsia space and not be cannibalized in a stereotypical space as well. So I do a lot of thinking in that in that realm as well, and sort of reading and absorbing other people that have been successful in navigating the system. Like right now, I've been reading a bunch of Andy Warhol just because I think it's fascinating.
No, and I think that's true. Like, we're all consuming way more than before, probably.
Yeah.
But being conscious about it. I think if you're a creator, you're a director, it's not just, garbage in then garbage out. So it's like really using that extra time that you're in front of a screen or reading and thinking in a smart way about what you're reading. Is it going to inspire your writing? Is it going to inspire your next work? Is it going to help you learn how to present yourself to the world? So I think you guys are raising that, like, be conscientious about your time. When do you write? How do you carve out that time to write or to shoot or to edit? Yeah.
I haven't been this excited since I was in college. I haven't been this judicious with my time since I was in graduate school. So this is thrilling, oddly enough, for me during this time. you know. So
I've also been very, very productive. It's just 24/7, 24/7.
Yeah, exactly. You know, but I know other filmmakers that are doing nothing, and they've gained like 20 pounds, and they're like angry and they're irritated, and you know their agents aren't calling them, and they don't know what all of this is going to mean for their careers and stuff like that. And I just think they're overthinking in the wrong space, and they're going to end up being on the outs. But other people like yourselves, you know, you guys are working, you're thinking, you're processing, you're continuing to push forward, and that's going to put you out in front to continue to be successful.
I also love Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf.
Yeah.
Actually, when I was little, kind of starting film school, one of the, you know, Rachel, this goes without saying, but like, you know, I'm not as much of an actor I am an actress director at this point, but you know, I didn't say I'm going to be an actor, then I'm going to be a director. I said I'm going to be a filmmaker. And so what I did do was start taking acting classes so I could experience that aspect of it. And I even attempted the Hughes Afraid of Virginia Woolf monologue, you know, and it, you know, at some community college in the Bay Area. And made a fool out of myself and enjoyed it and stretched and learned, and you know, this is a prime opportunity, you know, and if you're in quarantine, this is a great opportunity to stretch and learn and embarrass yourself in ways maybe not necessarily online, but you know, but maybe with friends. And also, you know, what I did when the lockdown started was, I mean, this sounds weirdly like a plug, but it isn't intended to be. You know, the Masterclass series, you know, the one with all the actors. Yeah, I mean, I just started binging those, you know, and got some things out of those. Well,
that's good.
It's not just about film, though. I binged The Art of Negotiation, you know, you know, hostage negotiation, all those different things that actually do apply to filmmaking in some form.
Especially hostage negotiation.
Hostage negotiation, it's absolutely true. And so using that opportunity to better oneself, I also started taking dance classes on Zoom, you know, hip hop classes on Zoom. Like it just became just like, okay, how can I stay, you know, sharpen this tool in a bunch of different ways from my apartment, you know, and be ready to get back to work. Now I am back to work, and it's hopefully paying off in a way. And also there's a whole other thing, which is you got to read, you can and should either read a lot of, you know, great filmmaking books and editorial books and writing books, because there are always other things to learn. You know, I always am refreshing myself on different ways to cover a scene or get inspired by beautiful works of art and look at how to get into and out of a scene. And, you know, there's just countless ways you could do it. Some people would argue there are only so many ways you can do it, but I would argue there are countless ways you can do it. So like that. So, you know, everything that Rachel and Frederick said and more, you know, can be done, and you'll just, and because as a filmmaker and or writer and or director, your vessel, I mean, you are just kind of, you're attempting as a director to reflect reality or shape a world that is grounded in some sort of relatable experience. Everything you do to kind of be a human being and observe in that, and also through everything you observe through a lens, all of that is relevant. You know, you can't stop learning how to be a good filmmaker, an interesting filmmaker.
Right.
Agreed. One of the other things I've been doing is I've been building decks for scripts, projects that I haven't necessarily written. You know, because I just want to make them come alive. And, you know, I'm not a camera person. I don't have a camera. I'm not an editor. I've never edited. You know, when I learned how to make films, it was still celluloid. So I don't have these, you know, younger skills. But I come out of advertising and graphics. And so I'm constantly making decks. And in that way, they come alive for me. You know, I could describe what the world looks like, or I could cast it, or I could really explore what is the theme of this and really go dig deep and try to build beautiful log lines. And, you know, all of these things that are very helpful once we get out there and we can, and you know, and even sell things now in the in the pandemic. So I'm a big proponent of making decks.
Rachel, at first, because we talked about cross-pollinating and dance and stuff, I imagined you like building a deck in your backyard.
Oh, that's
like, I'm like, oh, she's woodworking now. Okay.
I wish. I love a deck in my backyard.
Like that you were gonna, say some directing thing you realized when you were building a new deck or something in your backyard.
No, but I also wanted to say to Jennifer, when I was in college, we did a scene from Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, and I played Honey. And I was so bad that the teacher in front of everyone embarrassed me and said, Rachel, have you ever been drunk? And actually, I don't drink, and I've never been drunk. And I had to say that in front of everybody, like, no, sheepishly. I was a terrible honey.
But those are all such positive experiences. It's like what Jennifer had said, that just to stretch oneself and to feel in new spaces. She's made me think like maybe I should take a hip hop class online.
Yeah.
You should.
You gotta have courage. Like being a filmmaker is, in my opinion, is the ultimate in courage. Like you have to be really fearless to be able to do it, because we've all met so many fearful filmmakers and they're so scared and they think like there's only one way to get out of this scene, when there's boundless ways to get out of this scene. There's so many things that you can do between heaven and earth if you have the courage to just leap out of the box. And we just live in a world and work in a business where everybody's constantly get in the box, 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 when there's nothing in the box. It's not interesting in the box. The box is so boring. We know this over the past 8-9 months, that being all in the box is really a waste of time. And and that's where my life has just totally changed. Yeah. I'm talking to only people that are out of the box. Yeah. I'm done with all the other stuff. The Rolodex has changed.
How do you move past the fear? I think this is such an important question.
Yeah.
And move actors. I wanted to get into directing actors. So I'm going to use both questions, right? How do you move past fear when you're afraid? And then also how, when you're working with an actor who's maybe afraid and doesn't want to go there, or struggling to be vulnerable or something like that, how do you handle those situations where fear is freezing us as creators or someone else on our team?
I think you want to go first, Jennifer?
No, go ahead.
I was having a conversation with a friend of mine recently who is an actor, and she's terrific. And she kept saying over and over again, I just want someone to believe in me. I think if people believe in me, I can get where I need to go in life. I just need people to be there for me and believe in me. And that is so true. And that is essential for all of us to be successful at anything in life. That's why we care what our parents think. We care what our friends think. We care what our teachers think. We want them to support us. Now, if they don't, then you've got to have the resolve to be able to still push through and move on and find your voice and find your people and things like that. So a part of it is a journey, I think. It's who you're exposing yourself to. It's who you have around. I'm similar to Jennifer in that I was a filmmaker first and kind of fell back into the acting thing, and then was taking a lot of acting classes because I really wanted to understand how actors felt and thought as well. And I noticed for myself, I performed better when I knew the people around me were cheering for me. They wanted me to succeed. And I didn't always necessarily perform as well when I had people around me that were jealous, or they didn't like me, or, hey, you're a black guy that sounds or talks like a white guy. What is that? There's these like death or by 1,000 needle types of things that happen with people. And there's so much dysfunctionality in our culture where we're just always like being negative or putting people down. But like I said, you got to get with your people, the people that love you, for you, that cheer for you, that make you feel better. And that really helps to enhance you to success. With people on set or actors that are having the Category 8 meltdown, and you got to get them back into the right place again. Sometimes it's just literally taking a walk and you gotta talk to them, and you have to let them know that you're there for them. And on that particular day, sometimes that's what they needed to hear. And then you've got to have other strategies for being able to get through the scene or get out of the scene. Okay, we talked about it this way, that's not working. Let's think about something else, altogether different. And so it's just a frame of mind. I mean, your mind is so powerful and can elevate you to the highest heights, or it can just grab a hold of you and just drag you to the bottom of the ocean as well. And, some people need a little bit more coaching than others. And I think that's a part of being a director, that you're the coach, and they got to believe in you and you've got to believe in them.
Yeah. I mean, Rachel, do you have any thoughts before I ramble in?
Yeah, ramble in. I want to hear what you have to say. I also want to know why you're in Ireland.
Yeah, so there was a show that I was on before the shutdown, and it's called Foundation. It's for Apple. It's based on the Asimov series of books called Foundation, and it's very exciting, big series, and we're shooting it. So we're back in production. I probably start shooting October 20th or something. I should know, but yeah, it's right now. I can speak to the COVID of it all, but what I will say is that it makes me very, very optimistic about everybody returning back to production. I mean, I know it's happening, and as far as independent film goes, that too. Like, I feel as much as there's a lot of money being poured into making sure this is a safe situation, but at the same time, knowing now what it looks like and feels like to be as safe as possible, I think is a good feeling. So now I know, okay, even in an independent production, what does that take? Okay. And I've seen some fantastic leadership and role models coming into this situation. So more on that later if anyone's interested, but yeah, I mean, with regards to the, concerns about making actors not feel fear, that's a really great question. I've been involved in a wide variety of projects with a wide variety of actors and a wide variety of fear factor. And I mean, we could just, we could speak forever about this, but I think the quick thought is that your job coming into it is to put out those fires before they even start. So that means that ideally, whether it's doing your research to know that person needs special care, or reaching out to them way in advance and being available to them for anything that they're concerned about. Knowing how vulnerable they are. I mean, I can't wait to talk to my actors like as soon as possible right now, because I know that there's some, intimacy scenes I'm going to be having to worry about, some really huge dramatic scenes, and I want to kind of be on the same page with everyone about. And so it's just you have to know that as you want to get into like directing at a certain scale, the work is endless, and I haven't been sleeping enough, to be honest, and that's not good. So I'm going to take the weekend off. You have to learn how to balance your sleep. There's so much there, and you have to do that in order to be there for everybody properly. So it's a high stress, high pressure job, because you're trying to, I try not to be perfectionist, but you are trying to keep your eye on a lot of different things, a lot of prongs. So I'm sorry, that went into the oh my god zone. So what I really mean is, looking out for your actors in particular is huge, and yeah, it's an interesting balance, and that's why the art of negotiation, the art of hostage negotiation is relevant, because you have different personalities who all feel like different things that are at stake. So being able to empathize with what they're concerned about is key.
Yeah.
Well, you said putting out the fires before they start, and I think in terms of conquering our own fear, sometimes it's putting out our own fires, knowing what our fear triggers are, knowing what's going to freak us out, you know? And so we've already put that away, taking care of that before we're leading other people, because you're leading other people. You're a coach, you're leading. And so if you have your own stuff that's kind of there, it can really get in the way of that leadership role. And Rachel, I think you have something you want to share too on this.
I kind of just want to echo what both of you were saying from the director's seat in terms of fear, because I worked for so many years in hostile environments, really hostile environments, not with the actors, but with the production staff. They didn't want me there. They really didn't. And it was years, it was decades where I would just feel like vomiting every day as I walked onto the job. I knew that it was so tension filled. They were just waiting for me to fuck up. They wanted me to fuck up. They just couldn't wait. It was such a, terrible environments for years. And I just stuck with it. I just stuck with it. And it's only really been the last couple of years, the last 3 or 4 years when, before that, you know what happened? After I had my second child, I couldn't get back into doing the A-list shows. And so the only work I could do were sort of like syndicated shows, kids shows. And so the level of the work was lower. And suddenly I was a genius. Like, get Rachel, ask Rachel, she'll know. And the attitude shifted. And it was it's like when you're loved, when you're respected, when people think highly of you, it's like, this may be a crappy show, but I'm doing really good work. And then in the last couple of years, I've now been working on high-level shows where, the attitude has changed. They want women to succeed, and they want accomplished women. They want to make space for us and for directors that haven't been the same old guys that have been doing these for the last 30 years. And so I work so much better not having to think that I'm going to get sick to my stomach every second. And I can relax, and I can give, and I can communicate with my actors. And the other thing that I want to say about working on very high level shows is you have kind of the opposite situation where actors really don't want to hear from you too much. There's that side of it, and how to deal with that kind of actor that doesn't need anything from you, doesn't want anything, even if they do need something from you. And that's a whole other skill set to learn of how to communicate with an actor that's been doing this show, I don't know, maybe 10 seasons, and you're there for the first time, but you see things that maybe they don't see, and knowing when to speak up and when not to speak up, and when it's important and when it's not important, and how to get the trust of that actor until you feel like you can speak to them. That's a very interesting challenge too.
Yes. That's also, just especially within the it's such a tough subject to talk about, and it's so hard to listen to, because for me it's relatable. I totally understand that dynamic. I empathize with that, of just being dismissed offhand. For myself, I've had grip and electric people throw objects because they disagree with what I'm asking them to do.
Wow.
Yeah,
and then my dynamic's a little bit more male to male, so it can get it can get a little physical, or it can get, it's just,
you don't cry?
Not on set. But yeah, I started off as a camera assistant, and my first day they said to me, well, we don't normally hire African Americans in the camera department because they lack the intellectual faculties to be able to keep up. And that was the first day, and it's hard because you want love. That's why we exist. That's why we're here. That's a drive. And, that's taken away from you in that environment because they want to dictate to you where you can exist. And for me, it was really tough at times because operating in a director's position, then the other Black people that were there, they were generally older, they were men, and they worked in the grip and electric department. And those were my guys. Those were the people I hung out with. Those were the people that I ate lunch with, because those were the people that I identified with. Those were the people that loved me and respected me. And they would go above and beyond the call of duty. They would do the most amazing things and rig the most amazing things for me in the most narrowest of times. That was just phenomenal. Yeah, and then other people would say, wow, they don't really work like that for us. Well, you know, hey, what do you want? You know, so there is a war. There is a subtextual war that goes on with people that are different or that aren't the traditional leaders that they've all gotten used to. And they have a hard time adjusting to that. Even if the subject matter might be about a woman or be about someone of color or things like that, they still expect to be in the captain's chair, and
well, I hope you're finding that's changing, because I hope that will happen for you too.
I think that I've seen it change for women, and I think it's wonderful, and I'm very excited about that. But I don't really think or nor anticipate that it will change for someone like myself, because there's too many other geopolitical things that swirl around it as well, as far, and so for me, being someone who also believes in social justice, things like that, I'm not the right kind of person when they want somebody of my background in that position, because I'm not anybody's flunky either. I'm my own person. So I don't really anticipate, I don't even look towards the business in that way anymore. I sort of do my own thing, blaze my own trail. I figure out ways to make it work for me. That sort of pipe dream of like, someday they're going to want me around, that ship has sailed. I'm so happy for so many of my female counterparts who are getting those opportunities, and they deserve them, and they're long overdue. And I salute them, but there's a different dynamic when you're a male, especially a Black male. And then if you are a Black male that believes in himself and that believes in standing up for what he feels is right, that we haven't gotten there yet. That's still kind of shaky ground. I mean, Spike Lee just won an Oscar 20 minutes ago, and he's been around forever through the NYU program. You know what I mean? Like, he jumped through all the hoops, and he should have more respect, but it's not there. And then, you know, these Black male directors like, you know, Jordan Peele and Steve McQueen, things like that, they come out, they make awesome films, and then they kind of evaporate. Like, where's the next film? What's the next thing you're going to do? Like, where's the next opportunity? And you don't really see it. You know, and, you know, a lot of Black male actors, they get opportunities to play heavies and to be these unsophisticated characters. And there's not a lot of windows for growth and things like that. So, you know, for me, and I've had this conversation with Jennifer, the other Jennifer, before the last time we were hanging out together.
Well, and I think it made you decide to be independent, and as we discussed,
exactly,
with my company as well, because my partner experienced the same things, and we made different choices, you know, based on those responses. And I was going to ask, do you think that that's why you've decided to be independent, even though I know the answer, I'm asking that, and the lesson I think for directors is that you can build different types of careers for the person you are and the situation you're in, right? And the opportunities that are available at the time. Like, you're also not just saying, well, there's no opportunities for me, let me just stop. No, you're telling your stories, you're building your company, you're doing it in a way that works for you and who you are, and you're doing it well, and you know, and you're successful. So I think that's also important for any aspiring or active directors to see, like, the boxes don't work, and there is a place. You can carve out the way to do your creative work that's your passion as a director, even if the challenges are steep, even if, you know, and you're doing that. And for you, that looks different, you know, but you're doing that. And I think that's so important for people to see, because I think too often we're not even seeing that. Like, you know, Rachel, when you said, I finally saw women were directing, what? And I think there's still so many people in so many different subsets that are not seeing anyone doing these things. And so we need to show them that you're doing your thing and you're doing your thing, and that there are ways to do this work and to live your creative life.
Exactly. And for Rachel to have the intestinal fortitude to withstand that type of constant pressure and bias is, you know, I salute her. That's commendable. That's astounding. That's awesome. You know, and I wish everybody had that in them, but unfortunately we're not all built that way. The way I've gotten knocked around and been able to survive, I've watched other Black male directors crumble and fall away because they can't handle it. It's too much.
One of the reasons why I wanted to make this movie about Lily Ledbetter is because she's about righteous resilience. That I like to call it righteous resilience. You know, she was a poor Alabama tire factory worker who her entire life was subjugated from one group to another, to another, to another. Her entire life, a span of 50 years of relentless subjugation. And not only did she lost her own fight, but she became an advocate for other people and transformed into a different kind of woman who could speak up for others. And that's the lesson that we all have to take. If we do have the intestinal fortitude, we can fight for others. We can make this a better world, you know, for ourselves and for others as we do our work.
And that is an admirable life pursuit that needs to be admired and supported more. Like, we get too much into the, are you famous or not? And if you're not famous, that means you're not successful. You know, if you're not rich and powerful, you're not successful. And that's not true, because some of the greatest people I've ever met in my life are people that have given of themselves. I would not be here right now if my advisor in college had not taken time with me. You know, he didn't have to do that. That was like, you know, he wasn't getting extra pay for saving some Black kid, you know, but that find that within your heart is just amazing. And to tell that kind of story is awesome.
Well, and that segues beautifully, because I think, what is the most helpful piece of advice or thing that got you here, you know, with your fortitude or whatever, like if you had to pick like the one thing that you go back to, you know, maybe it is your mentor, Frederick, you've been talking about him a lot, but you know, that one thing that, like, I had a film professor, my one film class I took, so I'm not like you all, I didn't go to film school, took one film class at the very end of my master's degree in Middle Eastern Studies of all things, and then was like, this is what I should have been doing the whole time. But he said, if you haven't cut something you love, you haven't made a great film. And it stuck with me in lots of things. Like, I had to stop running a film festival at one point because I was trying to run a production company. I had 2 kids under 2. I had to cut something I loved. I loved that film festival, but I thought, this means I've got a good life. If I have to say goodbye to something or hand something off that I love. So for me, it became more than just filmmaking advice. It was like, try to make everything so great that sometimes you have to let go of something you love. So I don't know, is there one piece of wisdom, a little gem, or even something you told yourself that's become the gem that you think is really worth sharing?
Yes.
I mean,
But you go first.
I remember, okay, this is going to sound, okay. I mean, well, the first thing that came to my mind was, you know, one of my film school professors talking about how it's really important to network. Network, baby, you got to network. That was what she said. And it's interesting because I think about all the things that Frederick's mentioning with regards to success and the illusion of success and all of that. And I find that absolutely true, that, yeah, it's you can sabotage yourself thinking that way, like that, like, I gotta be famous. There's so many ways that can trip you up, which leads to my actual advice, which is, and I say this in the interest of everyone's, in all of humanity, it's to be okay with therapy. It's become a thing. It's become a thing that, I don't know, it's Issa Rae who was talking about how everybody in the industry needed therapy. And so I heard her say that, or I read that somewhere on some post somewhere on social media, and I was like, oh shoot, that sounds like wise. So I started looking into it, and since then, since I kind of dug a therapist out of, you know, the pandemic, because I was like, oh, this is a great time. I'm going to be sitting at home, and not, this is a great thing. I realized that it's really useful for people in our profession. It's just, there shouldn't be no stigma about it. Absolutely not. It's because it's you're lucky if you get to have therapy. You're lucky if you have the resources to kind of find a way to get therapy, or a great friend. I've had a combination of many of those things, but the point of that is to say that it's not only good for your creativity, but it is good for learning how to kind of deal with the stresses of what you think are failures or mistakes, or feeling in any way. Art is difficult, and directing is difficult. The entertainment industry is difficult. There are a lot of people who actually need therapy, like that are abusing people who don't have therapy, and who eventually need therapy because of the people abusing them. So all that's to say, if everybody had therapy, maybe a lot of good things would be better, even, or a lot of bad things wouldn't exist. And I'm speaking about the obvious, the racism, the sexism, the things that made Rachel ill, that probably made me ill, or constantly make me ill, about just the way people behave and how they act out of fear. There's a lot of that which are in every business, but I think it's, if everyone had the opportunity to kind of look at themselves carefully, I think we would all be a lot better. So I hope that can be digested.
I agree. And my answer is sort of similar but different, which is, I grew up playing with dolls, and dolls were incredibly important to me. I played with dolls. I had a million dolls. They were all real characters to me. They spoke to me. When I walked out of the room, I knew they were conspiring against me or for me, or throwing me birthday parties. They were all different characters. And I played with dolls up until the point where I was dating boys. I mean, they were so important to me. And I realized much later on that playing with dolls were my formative years of making movies. I was making little plays and making little movies, even though there wasn't a visual component to it. And so the point of that, and I also draw, and I just think that as creative people, we really need to get deep, 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 deep inside our imaginations. And our subconscious and our imaginations are not dissimilar, so that's why I'm piggybacking on what you said. And I think it's really important that you really understand your imagination. You know what that voice is, or those many voices are. And because those voices will not only be the voices that help you create your work. I mean, sometimes I feel when I'm writing, I'm just a medium, and the voices are just traveling through my brain into my fingertips. But they're also the voices that will create your work, and that will also keep you sane, because our imaginations are all that we have. My imagination keeps me happy. I have a happy imagination, even though I write very dark material. I write science fiction, and I write thrillers, and I write very dark material, but it's happy in my mind. So I just think the best thing all of us need to do is to nurture our imaginations.
Yes, agreed. That's awesome. That's so true. And not enough people do that, and not enough filmmakers, once they get into adulthood, continue to do that as well. They get too far inside their own heads and worry too much about what everyone else is doing or what's trending. For myself, it's my relationships with others, specifically mentors, people that are wiser than me, older than me, that know more than me, that have experienced more than me. I have a tendency to gravitate towards some of the older filmmakers that are around as well. Those are some of the people I get the closest to, or befriend the most, or love hanging out with and love talking to as well. And not just filmmakers, but artists in general. It's not just about filmmakers, it's about sculptors and painters and musicians and that whole zeitgeist of creative forces in the universe. I have a really good relationship with a gentleman who's Japanese. He lives in Tokyo. His name is Muramasa Kudo. He used to live in LA for a long time. And he's gotten a little bit older now, so he's moved back to Tokyo to live in his golden years. But I was blessed with the opportunity to be one of his sort of people that got to be around him, and he would share endlessly with those who were willing to listen. And he said two things to me that have just really stuck. Trust your instincts and you'll never be wrong. And no is the most powerful word in the universe. And it's held true in my life. When I stick to my guns, go with my gut, go with my instincts, what I'm feeling, it serves me well. And I have found so much success on the other side of no. And every time I've gone the other way in this business and said yes, I have literally just spiraled to hell, where I've just ended up in the wrong place with the wrong people. Like, you know, when I lived in LA, you know, I said yes to something and I ended up working for Suge Knight. So that wasn't a good idea, you know. And then other people I've said no to. And then on the other end of that no, something else miraculously special that's so much better happens. Yeah. And I've learned that lesson, that it's okay to say no. And sometimes when you come from a disadvantaged situation, you think like, the more I say yes, things are going to work out better for me. And it just sets you up to be exploited and undermines what your agenda is, because everyone around you is only focused on their agenda. So that's my big sort of tidbit there for that.
Well, thank you all so much. We've gone a little longer than I had expected. And Jennifer, I know it's very late where you are. So I want to thank you all so much. This has just been an incredible conversation. Last thing, if you want to plug what you're watching or what you're working on, I always like to end with that. And, we'll be quick because it is late there. But if anybody, you've both mentioned some projects, but two of the three of you have. But if you want to share something you're watching that you love or something you're working on that you love and you want people to be aware of, I just want to offer that opportunity before we completely wrap up. And I want to say again, thank you so much. This has been really a great conversation.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure. And it's been really lovely meeting you, Frederick and Jennifer.
Yes, absolutely.
I wish you both great luck, and I hope we get to meet each other one day in person.
That sounds wonderful. And likewise to you, Rachel and Jennifer as well. It's been a pleasure. It's always great to meet filmmakers with a lot of guts and a lot of glory. It's always an awesome conversation as well.
And I'm just watching The Daily Show and
yes,
Colbert. Late Night with Colbert from Ireland. I have to use a VPN. But that's all I watch because that's all I have time for. But it's the thing that is the opposite of my stress, even though it's about stress. It's about all this terrible stuff. But we're laughing.
That's awesome. That's so cool. I'm watching a lot of French New Wave cinema, Italian cinema, Ingmar Bergman, and Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf. Anything that is radicalized, edgy, pushing the needle. And then I'm just sort of in the time machine, looking back on the past, harnessing inspiration. And it's like, well, how did people do it the first time around with all of this civil unrest? How did it work out that time? So I've just been really fascinated with that lately. That's kind of been my jam. That's my go-to right now.
Anything you want to share, Rachel, before we wrap?
I've been watching, I just went through all the seasons of Halt and Catch Fire, which I liked a lot. And now I'm watching Ridley Scott's Raised by Wolves, which is interesting. And should we promote what?
We're watching the same stuff. Yeah.
Yeah.
I was watching that before.
It's good. It took a couple of episodes to get into it, but I like it. And what about our social media? Do you want to know our Twitter handles?
Sure. Yeah, we can do that. I'm Indie Jen Fisher. Some people know me there. Go ahead. Yeah, everybody share your socials so we can all connect virtually as well, please.
On Twitter, I'm at Women Call Action.
Oh my God. You go first because I have to just keep it.
I am, everything is at Frederick, capital F, R, the number 3, D, E, R, the number 1, C, K. If you threw that into Google, you'd get everything. I'm at Free Friedrich on Twitter and Instagram and Facebook and everything. And then I have my own little digital platform called tomorrowpictures.tv, where I put all of my original content and then syndicate other people's content as well. So, and we are very gender balanced and also culturally and diverse sensitive. So that's kind of my lane and what I do is as well. And currently doing several different projects ranging from social justice to people in the transgendered community as well.
Great work. Love following you. And there, Jennifer did it. Right there.
Pong Vantages on Twitter.
Yeah. And anytime you get a chance to watch the work of any of these people, don't pass up that work, that opportunity. Check it out. And thank you all three for joining me this evening. And thank you everyone for tuning in. And happy to see you at the next one. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Be
All right.
well.
Hang in there, everybody.
Bye.
Bye. Be
Bye.
safe.